Have you ever wondered how sharks get discovered? Now, I'm not talking about just, regular sharks like your great whites, your makos, your bull sharks, your tiger sharks. Those are like sort of the iconic sharks. Those are like the popular kids in class type of sharks. But these are the sharks that are really unknown because they've been lost or they haven't been seen in a long time. But it's important to know if they've gone extinct or if they're still around, and to be able to say, hey, there are actually a lot more sharks than the sharks that we talk about or we see in documentaries and in movies all the time. It's important to know the diversity because it's important to know how far they each stretch out in terms of shape, form, size, look, different adaptations, and so forth, and even different depths within the ocean. Well, today on the podcast, I have Dr. David Ebert, who is my co-host for the Beyond Jaws podcast. He's here to talk about his recent trip to Madagascar, where he went to look for lost sharks. And we're going to talk to him about his journey. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to start the show. So let's start the show. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. I have a special treat for you today because this is an episode that we are going to show on Beyond Jaws podcast. So if you haven't heard of Beyond Jaws, I do a separate podcast. I co-host it with a friend of mine, Dr. David Ebert, who I actually met doing an interview for this podcast a number of years ago, and we got along so well, even before and after we did the podcast we actually recorded. We actually talked about an hour or two before and after the podcast. We spent about like 4 hours on the call just to talk about everything, talk about science, talk about sharks, talk about sports and football and all this kind of stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And we just got to be friends over that time, and we decided, hey, you know what, let's start a podcast on sharks, because Dave is a shark biologist and he is someone who's very into finding lost sharks and discovering sharks that people don't really know about. These are like smaller types of sharks, so they may not look like your typical shark. They might be a skate, they might be a stingray, they might be a manta ray, they might be a chimera like a ghost shark, they might be a deep sea shark like a goblin shark or a sleeper shark, like all these different types of sharks that are out there that we just don't know, which is why I love the show All the Sharks on Netflix, because we were able to see so many different types of sharks and shapes and sizes and all these different types of adaptations and colors, of course, which were really cool to see during that show. Well, that's his life. Dave is there to discover sharks. He's discovered and named over 50 different types of sharks over his career, and he's here to talk about a project, a recent trip that he went to go to Madagascar, Africa, to be able to look for specific sharks. Now, did he find some? Did he not? We're kind of keeping that a little bit of a secret because we're going to be showing it on his show at Lost Shark Guy on his YouTube channel. And I wanted to kind of give you a perspective of what it's like to look for lost sharks. And it's probably not your typical way when you think about someone going into the field and looking for lost sharks. It's very different than going out at sea all the time and looking for a needle in a haystack, because the ocean is so vast, it's so big, it's so deep. It's very difficult to just go fishing for it or seeing it as bycatch, although that has happened. We saw that on Alien Sharks on Discovery Channel. Those are some of his graduate students of the past. And so I think it's important to talk about how Dave finds lost sharks in a lot of these countries and how he prepares for a trip like this. This is a series of trips that he's done over the last 3 years with help from the Save Our Seas Foundation that provides the funding for this type of work. And he talks about that, and we're going to talk all about that on today's episode. So here's the interview with Dr. David Ebert talking about discovering lost sharks in Madagascar. Enjoy the interview, and I will talk to you after. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Beyond Jaws podcast. We're going to be doing something a little different today. We're having Dave Ebert as our guest on the podcast today because he just came back from an incredible trip where he was looking for lost sharks. It's one of his trips that he does every year, it seems like, for the last couple of years. And we are going to talk about some of the things, he's going to tease some of the things that he may or may not have been like searching for, may or may not have found. We're going to talk a lot about sort of what it's like to go into a country like Madagascar where he went, and what it was like to, go into the fish markets and look for these lost sharks and engage with the local community. It's going to be a great episode. Let's get started with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. I am your co-host, Andrew Lewin, here with my co-host, Dr. David Ebert, but today's a little different because Dave is our guest today. So Dave, welcome to the Beyond Jaws podcast. Are you ready to talk about lost sharks?
Absolutely, Andrew, and thanks for inviting me on the show.
Isn't it great when you have like a podcast to yourself? Like you're like, hey, can I just be the guest? Yeah, we're going to talk about my trip. Absolutely, because this is what people want to know, and people want to know about your trip, right?
Well, exactly, and plus it's easy to book me.
We're doing this like just to let people know, like, guys, the date that we're recording this is on Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving. So it's like I had the day off. I had a little break with family stuff because we did our Thanksgiving yesterday. Dave's like, hey, you want to get together? Let's talk about it. I'm like, absolutely, let's do it today because we actually have some time to relax. And for all those who you don't know, some of you who have been guests on the podcast know that when we record the show, we record a show and it's usually like 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes a little longer. But afterwards, and before, Dave and I talked probably for like 2 to 3 hours. So it's been a long haul already. We've already been talking for an hour. We're getting into the episode. We'll probably talk for a little bit after that. But that's the experience you get as a guest on this podcast for any of you who have either been on and are watching this or want to be on in the future. That's what to expect. So just to let you know that. But regardless, Dave, you just came back from an incredible trip to Madagascar looking for lost sharks. Can you talk a little bit, just set it up? This has been a bit of a series. We've been doing the videos on Lost Shark Guy on YouTube. We'll put the link in the show notes. Can you just talk about sort of your journey throughout this whole process and how you ended up in Madagascar?
Yeah, well, I got to start off saying that the big thanks goes to the Save Our Seas Foundation, which is, I have a Keystone grant from them. It's number 594, and they've been spectacular with supporting this. And the project's really been to raise awareness of these lost sharks. And these are species that haven't been seen in decades, some in a century or more sometimes. And it's also just to raise awareness of species that people don't think about as sharks.
Yeah.
Things like the white shark, tiger shark, the high profile charismatic ones people know.
Popular ones.
But all these other ones people don't think about, especially in these, a lot of these developing countries like Madagascar. And so the project I've been working on with the Save Our Seas Foundation with their support has been to go to a different location every year. We started off 2 years ago. We went to South America, to Ecuador and Peru. And spent several weeks there just traveling through, looking for some different shark species.
Yep.
Made a lot of great contacts there. And in fact, the first on my YouTube channel at Lost Shark Guy on YouTube, the series Searching for Lost Sharks, Extinct or Alive, the first 4 episodes are up, and the episodes 2 to 4 really focus a lot on some of the South American species there, and some of the species that have been we went looking for, and one we didn't find. But it has a whole story there, and they're all sort of like 10 minutes plus or minus a few minutes, so it doesn't take up a big chunk of your time. And then last year we went to an amazing trip. We went to Darwin, Australia, up in the Northern Territory, looking for river sharks. Then from there we went on to Timor-Leste, just an incredible place. And if you don't know where Timor-Leste is, it used to be called East Timor. Go look at a map. This place is like almost no one knows about it unless you live in Australia or that part of the world. It was just one of the most unbelievable trips I've ever had. We're going to be having an episode on that coming out here in a few months now. And then from there we went all the way through Indonesia, starting in the east, went through several places, ended up in far western Indonesia. Again, highlighting a lot of new species there, rare species. And the cool thing with this series, and of course this year we went to Africa, went to Madagascar, but I'm working with people in country that are basically a lot of young, early career students, conservationists, researchers, and so it's been really neat working with these young people. They're kind of passing along what I know, passing my knowledge on to these young people in these countries. If you're basically the next generation, will be taking the torch, in the coming years. And a lot of these, most of these people are all like just really top-notch people. And I hope if you've been following the series, we've had most of them have been on the podcast here. And so if you have a chance, be sure to check in, follow the podcast, check out the series, and then you can follow these people all on their social media platforms as well. And so that's been really kind of another gratifying part to me, is just to be able to work with a lot of these young people in these different countries. And you'll hear about some of the people in Madagascar now that I had a chance to work with this year. And so anyway, check out that series on the YouTube channel, and you find out more about it. And of course, go to the Beyond Jaws because you can hear most of those people speaking there.
And it's a phenomenal series. Like, I know we're biased, but it's fun because it gives you a taste of what you do in terms of searching for lost sharks. I think a lot of people, and certainly myself, when I heard, before I knew who you were, like before we met and stuff like that, I started to, do some research before you came on the podcast for the first time. And I was like, oh, how do you search for lost sharks? Do you go out to sea all the time and like go to these trawls? Because I saw Alien Sharks, when Discovery Channel had some of your students on there at the time, and I was like, oh, this is kind of an interesting way, like, but it's got to be like, you're looking for a needle in a haystack here. We're talking about the ocean, and a lot of times it's deep sea ocean. So how do you find these sharks? But when you came on, we talked about it a lot, and you've really shown me, especially through these videos, that like the series, that searching for a lost shark is a lot like, really diving into the communities where you think these lost sharks have been found or have been seen in the past, and talking to fishing communities, talking to locals, and getting to know them and building those relationships. Like that's a huge part of what you do. And I think, do you find when people talk to you about the work that you do you find that's the biggest surprise that they have when they find out that that's how you find a lot of these lost sharks?
Yeah, well, a lot of people have unless you're in the field, have no idea there's all these different shark species out there, and they have almost no idea that these things have, in some cases, been missing.
Right.
And the thing is, I used to do some of these different like Alien Shark series and for Shark Week and for Nat Geo and BBC, and one of the things with this one, I wanted to be able to tell my story, the way I wanted to do it, without, editors and the corporate people telling, well, we need to do this. We need to have a flying white shark, which, if most people won't, but if you've worked in any of these shows, there always comes that one part when you're doing like when they're doing a show prep or the story prep, they'll say like, okay, now when does a white shark come into the episode? And I'm like, well, there's no white shark in the episode. And they're like, oh, well, I don't know if we'll want to do this episode then. So that's the nice thing about me. I've had the freedom to kind of like, I'm telling my story, and I've had, it's been great. It's been really good just for people to know, like with this journey I've been on. I mean, two people have been just invaluable. There's been Denise Sotomayor, a young Peruvian journalist, filmmaker, underwater cinematographer. She's been with me on these journeys the last 3 years, filming these things here. And then of course, Andrew, you've been invaluable editing this stuff here, because I'd have no idea what I'm doing editing. I can do the story, I can go through all the film clips, but I thank God I got you to do the editing on this whole thing. But both Denise and Andrew have been just invaluable in this whole thing, and even Denise, because Denise has had to go through these different adventures with me, and in the last 3 years we've had we've had coups, political assassinations.
Oh man,
nearly getting eaten by crocodiles. It's been kind of fun.
It's been interesting. Let's just say it's been very interesting.
And Andrew's sitting back there in Toronto, going, "Oh wow, that sounds kind of exciting." Yeah.
Well, I think it also it speaks to the some of the dangers of the world. Like a lot of the times, for me, I don't think I've ever thought when I was growing up, going through my undergrad, going through my graduate studies, that I would ever work in a country that I didn't necessarily consider, quote unquote safe, where I could do field work and I wouldn't be, other than the sort of the dangers of the environment that you're working in, on a boat or at sea, when you're doing field work, that I never thought about, different, like the politics of a country or some of the emerging issues that are happening within countries, as you mentioned, some of those. So a lot of times you don't think about the dangers that some of the people who you mentor are in just doing their work, and it's scary when you think about it. I've definitely been, been educated through what the work that you do and other people have done over the years of how dangerous it could be in a lot of these places, and how some people who live in certain countries have to be more careful in how they go about their business and go about their science, because it could be misconstrued as, interfering with other maybe, not so great activities going on in that country, and that their lives could be put at risk, in that kind
exactly.
of stuff.
I mean, there's,
right.
and again, this, I don't share a lot of stuff on air or publicly because my colleagues that are still in those countries could be at risk if I shared a lot of more detail on things I experienced. If it's just me, and once because I leave, I'm out of the country. It's like, I'm a little more open. But if I got friends, colleagues there, collaborators, I got to be careful what I say because I don't want them to suddenly get a target on their back because of some guy who's left the country now. And so and if anybody, most people don't know, but all I'm going to say is if you follow any international news and stuff, you'll know Madagascar. About 2 days after I left, they had some civil unrest there, and I think they're on their third president now in the last few weeks since I left, and so there's stuff going on there. But anyway, there's a lot of other challenges you meet too as well when you're working in a lot of these places there, and I try to convey that. But you got things like you're working in areas that it's difficult to get around. Madagascar, it's definitely hard to get around. The roads are not really very good. You basically, the best thing to do is hire somebody, which is what we did, and just who's basically a driver of the vehicle, just takes you to some of these remote spots. And people ask me, I think you even did early on, well, how do you find all these weird lost sharks? And it's well, because I'll go places most people won't go, because if it's easy to get there, you're probably not going to find anything too exciting. If you really have to work to get there, then your chances of finding something pretty exciting goes way up. And
what gives you that motivation to do that, though? Right? Because I get it. I get that, and it makes sense that a lot of places that are more remote, you find those sharks, whether you have to find it by land or you have to find it by sea or an island, whatever that might be. Have you always had that motivation to go that little extra mile to say, hey, I want to find these sharks?
Yeah. I mean, the whole, as I've kind of mentioned a few episodes, the lost shark thing kind of evolved over time. I didn't just decide I was going to go find these lost sharks, but I have that sort of explorer gene, and I've always had it.
Right.
And I've just wanted to go, and it's a curiosity too. I wanted to go find things. I wanted to learn as much as I can about all the different sharks. And just so everybody knows that when I say sharks, I'm talking about the rays.
Yeah,
the batoids, the ghost sharks, that's everything. They're all sharks.
Elasmobranchs.
Exactly, yeah. And chondrichthyans. Yeah. And what really kind of the whole lost shark guy thing started back in the 80s when I was, even though I didn't call it that, but I would go off into the, places. And at that time, nobody had really ever been to Namibia, even though people lived in Namibia, that nobody ever gone exploring the sharks there. And I'd go off there and I'd be gone a couple of months, and I'd come back with just wild things. I didn't know what to make at them. And fortunately, I had a professor, Leonard Campagna, who had a broad knowledge of all things shark. And he'd see things I'd bring back. He'd tell me we haven't seen this in 100 years. We haven't seen this species in 80 years. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. So that only
a little bit.
That only inspired me to go, to go more, to keep going. And so I went to a lot of places. And again, one of the things when you go to these places, another question I get is well, aren't you worried about the sharks? And I'm like, sharks are so far down on my list of things to be worried about. When I've been in places, and this was years ago, especially when I was young, there is this thing about age and wisdom for you young people listening. It really does. It is, because when I was young,
twice.
Yeah, when I was young in my 20s, I was like, sure, let's go do whatever, and you didn't think about, some of the realities of stuff.
Yeah.
But civil unrest was a big thing, would come up. You had different. I'd been in some places where their coups took place, where the government was. I literally was there, and people are shooting at each other and stuff, and things you don't even think about. When
you're also in areas, especially when you're in areas in Africa, where you did your PhD, if you went to Namibia or other countries, adjacent countries to there, where poverty was extreme in a lot of places. So just the fact of your personal, your team and the people who are going with your personal safety can be at risk in a lot of these places if you're not aware of what you're going into, right?
Right, you got to be aware of stuff. Like Namibia was, when I used to go back there, we'd just take, me and my friend Paul Cowley, we're both grad students, we just took off and went. There was just it was a little different. Other places we go to, I learned early on to work with local people where you could. because a lot of times there's language barriers and stuff. But yeah, when you go to these different places like, Madagascar, you go to some of these remote villages, and these little kids, they've never seen a white guy before, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, a white guy with blue eyes, especially.
Yeah.
And you just got these little kids following you around there, and just like, kind of like you're
curious,
you're curious. Of course, then after a few minutes, they're like, hey, maybe this guy has some money, so they're begging for money from you.
Yeah.
And one of the things, just kind of a pro tip, never give money out when you're traveling these places. You might feel like you want to, but don't. It won't end well for you in a lot of those places.
Yeah, once you start pulling out that wallet or putting out that money, it's all gone.
Right, it'll go bad. So you don't want to do that. But you go through these places, and you like, again, you have a country, like Madagascar, you got like illiteracy is about 70%. A lot of the country doesn't have much in the way of like electricity or clean water, certainly by Western standards. And but you find some of the nicest people. You go in these places, of course, and they're like, they're often they're very, show you around stuff. And of course, there they speak Malagasy or French, neither two languages I don't speak.
Right.
And but yeah, we're coming in working with local people, and in this case in Madagascar, I was working with Wildlife Conservation Society people, WCS. These are some of the people, Rhett Bennett, who's South African, who's been on the podcast. Yep. Some of the people work for him, because Rhett's sort of the Western Indian Ocean regional director for, I apologize, I'm not getting your title correctly, but regional director there. But like Christella, who was worked with her, and I apologize, I'm not pronouncing your last name, Christelle, because I cannot possibly begin to pronounce it correctly. And so, but we're going to have her on the podcast here early next year. And so people get a chance to hear her story. But she has a master's in marine science, and she's was just invaluable with being able to get around, knew where to go. We had a few of her colleagues there, a young guy named Liked. His name's Like. That's how you pronounce it. And he was great. Likeable guy. Took us around all the fishermen. Another guy down in the south. That was up in the north of the Noisy Bee area. Down in the southwest, another good friend of hers, Piero, who went to the university with Christelle, took us around. Took us to some just really remote villages that they were not easy to get to. And in fact, one of the ones we went to, they were catching deep sea sharks out there, which ended up being like one of the highlights for the trip. Just seeing some of these deep sea sharks, including we got a new record of one ray, a new ray for Madagascar, which is awesome. Amazing. And the other thing is they catch coelacanths there. If you don't know what coelacanths are, they catch coelacanths there.
I didn't know they went that far south.
Oh yeah, well they didn't. Yeah, the first ones came in 1995.
Right.
And the fishermen knew all, but one of the things the fishermen knew, like, what's the big deal? We don't.
We've seen this really, all the time. Yeah.
They're not really great eating, but we catch them and stuff. So So yeah, I'm sure if I would have given them some money, they probably would have caught one for me. But I really don't have any reason to want to get a coelacanth.
Right.
But they caught some really interesting species, like some gulper sharks and just some other deep sea squaloids, which are really where I see those deep sea things that you get pretty fascinated by them.
Yeah.
But it took every day it was a couple hours just to get down to this place, and you go there, you see like you pass a lot of the rivers and stuff. You see like people using the rivers. They're in they're bathing. They're getting drinking water. There's cattle. There's wildlife in there. It's just not the most hygienic place you'd want to be.
Right. To
get water. But you see those types of conditions because that's the only place there's no real running water anywhere else, and everything. So it's kind of I think another thing too. You ask, I like experiencing that stuff for myself firsthand. Most people
really get to see the world that way.
Yeah, you see
what's happening in each of these countries.
You see a part of the world that 95% of the world never. 95% of the Western world doesn't see.
Yeah, we hear about, but sometimes we don't hear about the right things. Like we'll hear about like the popular stuff that's happening, such as like these riots and stuff, but you never really hear about the innards of like what goes on in the country on a day-to-day basis, what it's like, how the people, how they're living, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and most of those people are just trying to get by, just go out, provide for the family. And you see these people go out, you see these fishermen go out in these just little dugout canoes that don't even look seaworthy. And yet these guys are just amazing, you watch them just, they got these homemade sails, and again, I'll be posting some of this stuff. I've posted some already, but I'll be posting more stuff in the coming weeks on my social media, particularly Instagram, and I'll try to post some on my channel as well. But you just see these people out there just like out there fishing, and they're absolute mariners.
Yeah.
These guys out there, and they'll go out there and they go out at night sometimes, and they'll fish for whatever, sometimes 7, 8, 9, 10 hours out at sea, and they seem to know how to navigate, because sometimes they'll go out fairly far out. Sometimes they'll be out for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know. I'm just like, I just can't believe they're even being able to navigate out there, but they're very good mariners. In fact, this one village we went to down the southwest, it was a pretty remote place we went to. Funny story is, we came walking up over the sand dunes from the village to the beach where they come in and land. As they came over the dune, there's these little kids with homemade surfboards out of wood. Out of a tree.
Homemade surfboards out of wood.
Yeah, I mean, they just some trees they chopped down. They made these little surfboards, nothing fancy, and they were literally like surfing. I mean, like some were boogie boarding, but some were just popping up and standing up surfing. And these were little kids, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, maybe 10.
Yeah,
and they were surfing. And
just in the surf, like the shallow waves kind of thing.
Yeah, well. Some of those waves were like 3-4 foot, so they weren't that
so that's
shallow.
Pretty big for a 5 or 6 year old too. Yeah,
I sent a thing to. I took some video and I sent it back to my buddies in Santa Cruz, Neil Perlberg and a couple other guys. That hey, check this out. These guys are here going to give you some competition. These little kids.
Wow.
So that was one of the. But that's the kind of thing like you. I get me excited kind of seeing something like that.
For
like,
sure.
Who would ever think these guys would be thinking about surfing?
Yeah.
And what inspired these kids to pick up a board, to make a board to surf on? I mean,
I wonder if that's just like a generational thing, like a traditional thing that people do as ways to enjoy the coastline and just enjoy the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think by the time these kids get to be 12, 13, 14, they're going out fishing. They start working the fishing. So these kids were a little young, not quite age to go out, because I think once they hit 12, 13, 14, they're working in the fishing business pretty much. So that's why these kids were like really young, and they're just playing like most young kids would do, just playing around and having a really good freaking time out there and stuff, and then wondering who the hell this guy is with,
is coming around
here, like asking questions, talking to their parents about different sharks, and they're kind of like, I see these things all the time. What's the big deal, And so I kind of so it was just, that's one of those things. Like we did get some film of that, and I hope when we get the episode up, we'll be able to show a little bit of these kids surfing how it comes out. I mean, the little video I took didn't look that great, but hopefully Denise has some little better footage of it. But it's just. Yeah, it's one of those like slice of life things you don't even think about in this kind of part of the world. Like these guys are actually surfing, and stuff. And so, anyways, that was kind of
awesome.
That was kind of a neat little story. Oh yeah, it was kind of a neat little story. But yeah, it was interesting. We went there. There was like 3 species I had on my hit list to go find. We found 2.
I was going to ask, just before you go into that, the preparation when you go to a country like Madagascar. First of all, like why Madagascar? Like what made you want to go? Like, you've been to Ecuador and you've been to Peru. You've been like over the last few years, especially through these SOF, Save Our Seas. And you've gone to Darwin, East Timor, Indonesia, like Jakarta, and now you're Madagascar. So like what was it about Madagascar? That was it the actual species that you were looking for? Like what makes you get interested in like where these species kind of come on your radar where you're like, hey, I'm going to look for this one?
Well, part of it is part of with the project, I wanted to highlight different parts of the world.
Okay.
Partly Madagascar came about because I've been to all of the other East African countries, from Kenya to South Africa, the Mauritius, Seychelles, those Western Indian Ocean places. I've been to all of those countries. I mean, okay, I haven't been to like Somalia, but that wouldn't really be a safe place to go.
Right. You
still
Sudan
have
to look at where you're going. Yeah.
So I mean, there is a point where you're like, that would not end well for me to go to like Somalia right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't been there before. It's one of those places sounds kind of exotic.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to check it out. And so I thought, oh, this would be good. And I knew of a couple species there that haven't been seen in a while. And I thought, let's go check it out and just go check it out firsthand. I knew it was going to be a bit of a tough, from talking to people that have been there, I knew it was going to be a bit of a rough trip, just because it was just rough in that.
Yeah.
There's not like a lot of amenities there. I mean, we do what we can. And I was glad I went. Like I said, it was the landscape and everything was nothing like I expected. Spoiler alert, if you've watched the animated movie Madagascar, it's kind of a lush jungle-y area. That's not Madagascar. It's very, very arid, very, I was there in the dry season too, but it's just very, very dry, a lot of dust, sand blowing around.
Interesting.
Very arid. Not at least the parts I was at. And again, it's a big country. I think it's one of the biggest islands in the world.
Yeah.
Top 5 maybe, but yeah, it was nothing like I thought. It wasn't this lush jungle area and stuff. And but again, a few people kind of gave me a heads up. But yeah, if you've seen the cartoon, the animation is nothing like that.
It's not like
Trust me. Yeah, I kept joking about looking for Alex the Lion and Morty and Melman and everybody, but no such luck over there. But they do have like they have a lot of endemic species there. I've actually one of the species I've described from there, the Malagasy guitarfish, Acteriobatus andisabini, is endemic. It's only known from Madagascar, and there's a few other species. In fact, one of the ones I was looking for is only known from Madagascar. I'm not going to give it away now because we're going to do a special thing on this one. But it was it's a species that hasn't been seen like in over 100 years, and so we went to see if we could find it, and we'll let you know what kind of luck we had with it. But there's a couple others there. There's some other species that haven't been seen in 30, 40 years. We looked for, and thought we had a chance for. And then there's another species that hasn't been seen in almost 100 years either. So we went for. I knew of, like I said, a few of them there that I thought would be good targets to go find. And then to say we found a stingray that never been reported from Madagascar before. I'm going to have more information on that later. Sorry to leave people a little bit of a mystery here, but there's some of these things are going to be really a big deal when they come out. And so we're going to do I'll do a separate show. We're actually going to do one of the Searching for Lost Sharks episodes just going to be on these species we went searching for. But as I say, we found some other species that were really some deep sea stuff that were really exciting to find. We found 3 species of gulper sharks, which was super interesting.
Yeah.
Probably the other thing we had to do, I met just an amazing woman down there, Stella Delmont, who's the founder and runs the Madagascar Whale Shark Foundation Project. Hope I got that right, Stella. And Stella's another one I want to have on the show. She's actually from Belgium, and but she spends part of the year in Madagascar, up in Noisy Bee, studying the whale sharks up there. And the whale sharks congregate at times of the year up there. And of course, the running joke with me is if you don't want to see whale sharks, just have Dave go show up there. You can go to the most abundant whale shark place in the world. Just have Dave show up, and they're all gone.
None. You might see manas. You're not going to see.
Yeah, exactly.
You might see manta rays, but you're not going to see whale sharks.
Just for those of you that have listened to when I came back from Ecuador, we went out to a place called Isla de Plata looking for the sharp-fin hound shark, and we went out there with Michelle Guerrero, who runs the Manta Trust, Ecuador Manta Trust group there.
Yeah,
and it's like the biggest manta congregation and whale sharks out there, and of course. No whale sharks there, but right after, like 2 days after I left there, all the whale sharks showed up. So,
of course,
and I've had several other experiences in Mexico and other places where like, oh, you'll absolutely see them here, Dave, and they never show up.
Yeah. So if you want to go see whale sharks, don't go with Dave.
Yeah, exactly. Like I will say, Stella did warn me. She said I'm probably a little early. They probably won't see him, but you still had to go make an effort out there and go see him.
Of course.
Beautiful day, beautiful day out in the water.
Beautiful day to see whale sharks. Beautiful.
Yeah, but they just weren't around. We did see whales though, which was kind of cool. Humpback whales, and I think minke whales. There's another one we saw
that's cool.
saw some other stuff, some dolphins. So we saw some other stuff, and I had a great time. It was really awesome, and we'll feature some of that stuff in there in the episode that comes up, and then Stella will be on the show here probably early in the new year.
Yeah.
Talk about her program. So.
Well,
So
just to say before you go on, just to say you were talking about the size of the islands, and I looked it up thanks to ChatGPT, and Madagascar is the 4th largest island at 587,000 kilometers squared. Borneo's the 3rd, New Guinea is the 2nd, and Greenland is it blows everybody out of the water, like 2 million. Yeah. Although isn't Australia considered an island?
I thought Australia was considered an island.
Yeah, so I think Australia would probably be the biggest if you're including that. I don't know how it's.
Though it's considered a continent.
Oh, it says excluding continents, so maybe that's why this list. Yeah. But also, just to let you know, in terms of for those of you who want to know, in the top 10, Baffin Island, which is Canadian, is up in the 500,000. Sumatra, Indonesia, Honshu in Japan, Victoria Island, another Canadian, Great Britain. Obviously United Kingdom, and then Ellesmere Island, another Canadian island, all up in the Arctic. So I had a feeling now, but that's why I looked it up. I'm like, we should have a bunch of Canadian islands up there.
Yeah,
but,
go Canada.
Greenland, go Canada indeed. Greenland is at 2 million kilometers squared, over 2 million kilometers squared. So it blows everybody else. New Guinea's the 2nd. It's at 785,000 kilometers squared. So kind of like bigger than everybody else, but interesting nonetheless. Yeah. So the fourth largest.
Kind of a funny story when we were flying there. I've flown from South Africa because just so people know, like just getting to Madagascar is not an easy task. You had to because I'm leaving from California, so it was like it's like 10 hours to London, then you got to lay over you got a few hours in London, then you have another 11 hours to Johannesburg.
Yeah,
you got to stay overnight. Then you got to stay overnight. Then you have like another 4.5 hour flight or so, 4 hours to Madagascar, and so it's and they only fly certain days of the week, so it's not like an easy place to get to. I basically left on a Thursday and I got there on a Sunday, so just to give you a sense.
Couple of layovers here and there, and all that kind of stuff.
I think you could go to Paris and then fly directly from Paris
to Madagascar.
Yeah, but I had I think you can. Yeah, you can. I think you can fly because they do have other airlines. I know you can fly from the UAE and a few other countries, but either way, it's still like getting from California to there. It's a long haul, and it was kind of funny. I've kind of flown over Madagascar before, but when because you fly out from South Africa, and then when you fly, and then as you approach Madagascar, you turn, you kind of head. In our case, we headed north, and I was looking out the window, and I kind of like sort of knew it was Madagascar, but I just kind of asked the flight attendant, like, hey, that's Madagascar there? And he goes, yeah. He wasn't sure. He says, well, I'll ask the pilot. And so the pilot comes back and says, like, oh, no, it's the Comores. And I'm like, I've flown over the Comores before. They're kind of a speck, a couple of rocks in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, the funny thing, I'm thinking to myself, like,
how does he not know?
I go, if the pilot doesn't know, we could be screwed here. And so when I got the noisy beep, the first thing I did was got online with a friend of mine I went to high school with who used to be an airline pilot, and told the story, and all she could do was like send me back an LOL, like laugh out loud. I'm thinking like, fuck, that didn't really help me too much.
No.
So
that's hilarious.
They probably figured I think she told me like she figured the flight attendant was probably busy doing flight attendant stuff, wasn't really paying attention, and
exactly
the pilot probably just threw out something, just thinking, shut the passenger up or whatever, and just kind of like.
Yeah, we're over the Comores. That's just the Comores.
Yeah, well, because I've flown around that area quite a bit. It was probably wasn't a great question for me to ask. I just was kind of curious, but because you fly along for about a half hour, 45 minutes up along a coastline. There's nothing else out there in the Indian Ocean because most, like Mauritius, Seychelles, if you blink your eyes, Reunion, you pass right over those places. But Madagascar, you kind of hit. So anyway, that was kind of a funny little story. We're going into Madagascar, like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And if you're asking the question out there, and I know people are, it's a burning question, like, how is it flying around domestically in Madagascar? And that's like something everyone I'm sure want to know. Well, just be prepared when you go there, because the flights can change quite rapidly. And thank God, like for Christelle, who was our accompanied us the whole way around there. And thank goodness we had somebody there, because they would literally change the flights or cancel them, but they don't tell you. You have to go online to find out if you still have a flight.
So before you leave for the airport, you just go online to check.
Yeah, like usually a day or two ahead of time, so you got time to contact them to say like, they'll get you in another flight, but you have to like check to see if you still have if there's even a flight going. This is the domestic airlines, Madagascar Airlines.
Right.
So that was kind of a funny little.
How did you find that out though? Did somebody tell you?
Yeah, Christelle did. Well,
a
couple people. Rhett Bennett kind of tipped me off before I went. He said, "Make sure you check the flights." But I'm so used to, like, here, if like you're flying it from the U.S. or Canada or Europe,
they tell you.
They tell you. You get a little thing on your phone or something like that. We've rescheduled your flight or put you in a different flight. Nothing there. You have to actually go online to check to see if you're even on the flight.
Yeah.
Well, if there's even a flight going, like, so Christelle tipped us off, and that's because she was on the same flight with us, so we'd go on there and we're like, "There's no flight. There's just nothing there.
Yeah,
your flight's just gone. It's not like we've booked you elsewhere, so you have to contact them and then get on another flight to."
Right.
And they'll put you on a flight. Like I say, they're great as far as rebooking you, but you had to like let them know that your flight had been canceled, even though they should have known. So that's some of the fun things about traveling in a lot of these countries, different places, because you get so used to a Western way that when you go to these places, it's just really it's just so different.
It's eye-opening. Definitely eye-opening.
Yeah.
In terms of what it does.
Yeah. It's kind of like I said, I kind of like the challenge and stuff. It keeps me young, especially running around with all these like young grad students and stuff.
Yeah.
And, early career conservation and research types.
Yeah.
That's all good stuff. Keeps you going and stuff. I figure that's why people ask me like, "When are you going to retire?" Like, well, I'm going to retire. I get to travel and have all these fun adventures, all these
wonderful things, and discover more sharks. I think that's great. Now let me ask you this. Every trip, you have a certain purpose, and you look at what's a success and what's not a success. Would you consider this trip, for what you were going to look for lost sharks, a success from 1 to 10? What would you consider like it being, as from like 10 to 6, like everything is successful, to 1 or like nothing went well?
I'd easily like a 9.5. I would. Okay. It was a good trip. It was a good trip. I'd never been there before, so I had a lot of. So it was just a big adventure for me and stuff.
Yeah.
I probably would have given it a 10, but the story for it, everybody told me like, just be prepared. You'll probably get some kind of a stomach bug while you're there, and I was like, okay. So thankfully I got a prescription stuff, some stuff to take in case you get food poisoning. Basically, what it is.
Yeah. I
made it through all the way to the end of the trip. I apologize, Christelle, but the last day we were there, Christelle says to Denise and I, says, "Hey, why don't you come out with my husband? I will go out for a traditional Malagasy meal." And like every part of my body's saying no, but my lips were like, "Sure, let's go out." And I tell you, it tasted really good going down.
Not so good coming back.
The return when it came back, it wasn't so good a few hours later. And so that kind of like I had to knock off a half a point. And that was my fault. It was strictly, but I had to knock off a half a point just because it was like, and just for a pro tip, if you're traveling to these places, like go to your doctor and get like a prescription of like erythromycin. That stuff will, your other stuff, over the counter stuff, it's okay, but this stuff will just knock the shit out of what's ever in your stomach. And you believe me, you want to have that, especially when you're looking at, you have to get on a plane in like 9 hours and fly for 4 hours. You do not want to be like heaving your guts out. So
you definitely don't want to do that.
So other than that little glitch, it was a great experience. And as I tell people, Andrew, it's like I wanted to travel the world from the time I was 10 and search for sharks, and I've been living the dream for over 40 years now. And the young people listening, like, you have a dream, go for it. You're young once, and I'm still. These challenges keep me young, even though I'm well past my, say, 30s. It keeps me young, and I do. I get it, and you can tell you know me for long enough. I get excited about it. I get excited now as when I was in my 20s to go on these adventures like this, and just kind of to meet those challenges. But I think reinventing yourself, always trying to learn new skills and stuff, always keep you young. And if you start at a young age with that attitude, it'll carry you a long way in life. And anyway, it's like just advice I like to pass along to young people there. And anyway, watch out. We'll have a YouTube channel episode coming up on this with everybody. I'll be posting on my social media, particularly Instagram, but I'll be posting some of the other Facebook and LinkedIn and some of the other stuff. And I just want to say one more time, just a huge thank you to Save Our Seas Foundation. You guys have made this all possible with all your help for this thing. And I just want to thank people. I mentioned Christelle, Piero, Stella in your group. Amazing. Sorry if I forgot anybody else. And also some of the fisheries ministers we met there. Amazing people. Really doing all their best they can do, to help fisheries and sustainable with sharks in Madagascar. And thank you all so much for your help in all this.
Absolutely. If you want to follow more, you can follow the episodes that we're putting up on Dave's YouTube page or YouTube channel. That's at Lost Shark Guy. So if you just look up, I'll put the link in the show notes so you can take a look. But you can always check that out. There's 4 episodes already out. The 5th episode will probably be out by January, I think, of 2026.
Yes.
And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're heading into the time where Dave went to Darwin, East Timor, Jakarta, Indonesia, and some cool things happen. So definitely take a look at that, and looking forward to seeing that. Subscribe to the channel, and you'll get access to those videos, which are short. They're like YouTube style videos, so they're perfect for what you need. And of course, Denise went with you to take those videos for those trips.
I did not want to forget.
That's all right. I got you.
Denise Sotomayor, thank you so much.
Yeah, she's absolutely phenomenal. So she's been on the podcast before too. So anyway, Dave, thank you so much for sharing this with us. We look forward to hearing more about it through the videos on Lost Shark Guy, the channel, the YouTube channel. We want to thank you for coming to the episode. Appreciate it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave, for joining us again on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It was great to be able to show what we talk about on the Beyond Jaws podcast and now what we talk about on this podcast, to be able to show it on this one. And I think that's really important to be able to promote not only the different shows, but to show you that there's different types of stuff that we talk about. Now, when we talk about a lot of the stuff on the Beyond Jaws, if you haven't heard it yet, I highly recommend that you go listen to it. It's very different than How to Protect the Ocean. We talk a lot about the careers of a shark scientist, because one of the reasons why we do is, one is to show how the career is not a straightforward path. Most of the people who have been on the podcast have been working in the field for a number of different years. Like it ranges from like 5 years as graduate students all the way to like 35 plus years, like what Dave's been working, and Greg Scommel, Lisa Natanson, who's now retired, and so all these different types of people who are working in shark science, who have worked in shark science. The idea is to show that the careers are not straightforward. They meander and give advice. Everybody gives advice, their own advice, and what helped them do the work that they do right now and over those years. So it's a lot of fun to be able to check that out. So I highly recommend that you go to Beyond Jaws, check that out. You can go to speakupforblue.com/Beyond Jaws to check out that podcast. But in this episode, I wanted to show you something different, because it was different. I told you it was going to be different. When we think about going into the field and we look for lost sharks, we're not going necessarily on the ocean. We're going into fish markets. Dave goes into fish markets, talk to local fishermen in the different places that he goes, like even Madagascar, the 4th largest island in the world. You have to travel to different places, remote places, and speak to people who have probably fished there all their lives to be able to say, hey, what do you see on a regular basis? Do you see this fish? Do you not see this fish? If you actually go to the Lost Shark Guy YouTube channel, and you can check that out in the show notes below. If you go and check that out, you'll see in the first couple of episodes, they had a number of different people that go around and they show posters of pictures of the shark. And so the Adriana Gonzalez does, and the other Adriana, I forget her last name, I apologize. But they went around showing the pictures of the sharks to the fishermen who were like, oh yeah, we've caught that, or it's been like 30 years since we caught that, or it's been 20 years since I saw that, or I just saw that the other day, or something like that. So they go around with pictures, and they go around and speak to local fishermen and locals who see this at the fish markets, who see this that they catch on their boats or not catch on their boats. And it's a very important aspect of finding these lost sharks, to make sure that it's like, hey, if we see them at a fish market, well, they've been discovered again. where did you find these? Where they've been? When was the last time you saw this? Or like, when did you catch this fish? There's a lot of different things that go into it. And it's not the perfect science, but it's something where you explore. And Dave always wanted to explore in his career and be able to travel and look for sharks. And he loves it, as he mentioned. He's well beyond 30 years old, and he still gets excited when he sees these sharks, or when he goes on a trip like this, to be able to discover some of these sharks. And I have to say that, when things went his way, per se, I got a text and he was very happy with what he saw in certain situations. So, it's a lot to look forward to. We will be putting the results of his trip on the Lost Shark Guy YouTube channel. So I highly recommend that you look at that over the next year or so. It's going to be a lot of fun to be able to see what he's been able to discover and what he's found. And then, of course, his camera woman, Denise, she's been amazing in each one of these trips. They went to Peru, Ecuador a couple of years ago. And then last year they went to Darwin, East Timor, and Jakarta, Indonesia. And then this year they went to Madagascar. So a lot of really cool things. And that's thanks to Save Our Seas Foundation. So we appreciate the funding that you're giving Dave to do this type of work. And I will highly recommend that you watch it and let me know what you think about discovering these lost sharks. So let me know in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you are watching this or listening to this on your favorite podcast app, the audio version, just hit me up on Instagram. DM me at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. And if you want to know a little bit more and you want to email me, you can do so if you go to speakupforblue.com/contact, and that'll go right to my email if you fill out that form. And if you want to know how to get a hold of Dave, it's at Lost Shark Guy on Instagram, but I'll put all his social media contacts in the show notes. So that's it for today's episode. I want to thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin from the True North Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.